There's just so much.
You're listening to a Mamamia podcast.
Mamamia acknowledges the traditional owners of land and waters that this podcast is recorded on.
From Mamamia, I'm Mia Freedman, and you're listening to a very different episode of No Filter. Does that make you nervous? Some people don't like change. I like change. One change that we're going to talk about today is the change of menopause, peri-menopause, the stuff that happens to women as we get older. Every woman. This episode is a special one because it's me interviewing 3 women on stage at South by Southwest that was held in Sydney. They're amazing women. Actress Naomi Watts, who's also a business owner. Alison Brahe-Daddo, who many people will remember as a dolly model, but she's now an author and an educator. And Dr. Ginni Mansberg. They're all experts in their own way about menopause. They're all women in their 50s. Hopefully our generation will be the last to have shame around this topic, menopause and peri-menopause. It was a funny conversation. I enjoyed it so much. And so we decided to turn it into a bit of a podcast and bring it to you now. There's advice, there's personal stories, there's myth busting. It gets funny, it gets rude, it gets emotional. You're going to love it. Here's Naomi Watts, Alison Brahe-Daddo, Dr. Ginni Mansberg, and me. Hello, we're like the Beatles but with hot flashes. What a treat to be sitting with 4 such accomplished women who are all in their 50s, all of us, and talking about something that until recently wasn't discussed much and no one wanted to really be associated with. But on our stage, we've got 2 women who've written books on the topic. We've got 1 woman who's launched a business catering to women going through menopause. And we're very excited to be bringing this topic out into the open because for anyone in the audience who hasn't hit it yet, it's coming for you. And it's not all bad news. So I wanted to start by asking our panel, what did you think menopause was before you experienced it? And looking back, what was your first symptom or symptoms, Naomi?
Yeah, menopause to me was pretty much the signifier of the end as I knew it. I knew nothing. I did know that my mother went into menopause early, but no other information surrounding that. I didn't know that she had a number of years leading up to that point that she may or may not have suffered. I didn't know that she possibly had a myriad of symptoms. I didn't know that it occurred on a day, you know. I just knew nothing. And what happened with me, my symptoms mostly that occurred were around shame and fear and anxiety because I happened to go to my doctor and say, look, I'm not getting pregnant. Can you explain why? I've spent my whole life trying not to get pregnant and now suddenly I want to get pregnant and it's not happening. And so the doctor suggested that we take a blood panel. I took the bloods and the bloods suggested that I was close to menopause. And so that's where the panic came in. I literally
How old were you?
I was 36. So that was the first uttering of that comment being introduced to me. I went to my mother and said, what the actual beep? Why didn't you tell me more? And she said, well, these were the conversations I never had with my mother because she never had them with hers. And so the cycle went on. And that just floored me. Like, how has that happened when we know that half the population will get there at some point, as you said? How is that actually possible? And we're living longer now as well. Where is the education? Where is the conversation between friends even, sisters, family members?
Alison, had you talked to anyone about menopause or peri-menopause before it happened to you? How old were you?
I think I was about 45, 46 when I got my first symptom, and that was just a change in my cycle that was really radical. I'd go from 2 weeks to heavy bleeding to no bleeding, but I hadn't even heard the word perimenopause. That was a brand new word. I was like, what the hell is that? And I thought menopause was just your period stopping. honestly thought that's all it was. And then to start to do the research on it and look at, we were talking before, 53 symptoms, and the amount of effect that it has on women, the amount of effect in the workplace, the relationships, the mental health. It was so unbelievably shocking to me. It was like I'd lifted up this carpet and there was all of this stuff underneath that people had just swept under and no one had told me it was all there. So I was deeply shocked, and that was the reason for writing the book and researching more about it, because it was something that I had 2 older sisters, a mum, not a word, group of women, not a word. I was just left very alone in that as well. And I think a lot of women feel that way if they haven't been, explained the symptoms and what can go wrong and what can go right as well, but a real sense of loneliness.
Ginni, Australian women, I'm told, love to say, I'm going to get my hormones checked, because I think that's when I noticed changes in my cycle. I also just assumed that menopause was like a slow turning off of the tap. In actual fact, my tap turned on, which I really wasn't expecting. I'd always had pretty light periods, and then they were suddenly very, very heavy. So along with a few other symptoms, I went to see my GP and I said, I want to get a blood test, assuming that the blood test could tell me whether I was in menopause, peri-menopause. Is this something that women do often? And maybe you could explain why there is no blood test and what menopause even actually is.
So a lot of people don't realise this. Menopause is a single day. So it's a day that happens 12 months to the day from the first day of your last period. Only you didn't know it was your last period, because at that point, they're all over the place. You didn't know whether another one was coming in 3 months or 6 months or 2 weeks, for all you know. So if you are, switched on enough to remember that's your day of menopause, it's the roller coaster leading up to menopause that we call perimenopause. That is the absolute car crash. And there actually are 2 phases of perimenopause.
You just skimmed right over that.
I know. There are 2 phases. The first one is when ovulation kind of goes and you're not ovulating that much. If you don't ovulate, you don't get a lot of progesterone. So your progesterone levels drop. But at that point, your brain is still trying to kick your ovaries into gear. And so it's putting out heaps of stimulating hormone. So your estrogen is going up and down like a yo-yo. So I could do a blood test for you at 9 a.m. Monday morning, do the same blood test Tuesday afternoon, and the levels will be completely different. So I've had lots of my patients say, I went to the doctor, they did a blood test, I'm in menopause and I had my last period 2 weeks ago. Okay, that doesn't make sense. You've just all heard menopause means that it's been 12 months since a period. And until that time, unfortunately, the blood tests are completely useless. But we also know that your blood levels of hormones correlate very poorly with your symptoms. So it's a really unhelpful test. We know that individual women, I see maybe 10 new patients a day with peri and menopause symptoms. I have never met 2 the same. Everybody is different. That makes it really difficult to manage, because getting support from your friends can be really difficult. But at the same time, the hormone tests, don't bother. It's really a waste of time.
Can you explain to everyone what estrogen is responsible for in the body?
That is, how long is a piece of string? In every single organ of your body, from your heart to every joint to your skin, to every bit of collagen in your joints, in your bones, in your muscles, through to your brain, unbelievable numbers of estrogen receptors in your brain, in your guts, in your lungs. Estrogen receptors are everywhere, and they do different things in different body parts. And that's why when I started specialising in menopause, I think we had 7 symptoms of menopause. We just cracked 53 because we just added chronic cough to the mix, which is a brand new one. Welcome to the club, chronic cough.
That feels unfair.
Yeah, thanks for that. But there are very few body parts that are unaffected by the loss of estrogen.
Some of the more physical symptoms like hot flushes, insomnia, those kinds of things are fairly well known, cycle irregularity. I think what was a shock to me and a lot of women is the emotional changes. Ali, can I ask you, what was your emotional and mental state like when you were going through peri?
Well, that for me was, if someone asked me what was the hardest part of perimenopause, it was absolutely the emotional toll that it took on me. And I always thought of myself as a fairly optimistic person, but I became severely anxious. I became depressed. There were days I did not want to get out of bed. There were days that I thought it'd be better off if I wasn't around. I take too much of a toll on my family. I couldn't see that I was ever going to come out of that state. And it was a weird experience at the same time, because there was another part of me kind of looking down going, where are you going with this? Like, what is happening right now? I got myself to a therapist at that point because I'd never had those kind of thoughts ever. And there was no reason for it. You know, it was just my hormones, just. But that was by far the hardest part for me.
Naomi, what about you?
Yeah, I think so. This timing of the pregnancy thing, like I was all motivated to just have my children. I thought, how do I figure this out with my doctor? And my doctor, mercifully, was very pro hormones and all of that. And despite the fear that was surrounding the
You mean
2002...
HRT? Hormone replacement therapy.
HRT, hormone replacement therapy. Firstly, I'll say I had 2 children naturally. I tried things. I wasn't a candidate for IVF. Inseminations weren't working for me. Clomid, nothing. So I did natural interventions. Mercifully, I was able to get pregnant. As soon as I had my second child, I basically went into hardcore symptoms. And like you said, peri-menopause was not a word that I knew of or my doctors were using. I then went into the shame part again. I went into, oh my God, I'm finished. I'm no longer sexy. I work in Hollywood, you know, and if you're not fertile, you're unfuckable. And I'd actually heard that term from an agent from long ago. You better get going, you better put your pedal to the metal, work, because you've only got until you're 40. And I said, what is that? Why? And he goes, well, you know, you become unfuckable. And you can't play a leading lady. So that was just shocking to me.
So for you, it had career implications as well.
Yeah, for sure. So the shame and the panic and the loneliness. But as I said, my doctor was well educated and walked me through it. I trusted my doctor. So the symptoms that I had were dealt with pretty quickly. I've been on HRT for a lot of years now. I'm a big advocate of it because it's all a cycle. I couldn't sleep. You then get brain fog, you then get depression, you then get all kinds of things. So you're on a cycle of going nowhere fast. And
did anyone else have rage? Just me then? Rage and weeping.
Rage.
No, I'm with you.
So we know that 1 in 3 women will get anxiety and or depression around this time. And what a lot of us never talk about, and in this country we rightly acknowledge perinatal and postnatal depression and anxiety, and it's really well funded, which is great, but the peak period of vulnerability in a woman's life is actually around perimenopause and the early postmenopausal years, and it's actually the peak time for suicide as well. So we need to be talking about
divorce.
this. Yeah, and divorce and career-ending moves, you know. And you've got to think about the women in the workplace who are looking at that 50-year-old woman going, oh, my God, I do not want to be that. And they're going to exit because they just look at her with her rage and she's pissed off at everybody and pissed off with her kids, hates her partner. You know, it's not a great inspiring figure out there. And we know that the main symptoms, because it does look a bit different, the anxiety and depression, and it often hits people who've never had a mental health issue ever in their life. But what we know is the rage is a big one. You know, that just pissed off with everybody. The weepiness, extreme anxiety, these are the sorts of things that happen that are quite different. And you can tell that it's hormonal, and we treat it differently because it is hormonal.
And then throw in some teenagers. Just to top it off.
Doesn't Mother Nature give us teenagers at the worst time of our lives? And elderly parents as well, because we're all like, you know, you've got to take mum to the doctor and then take the kid to another call from the principal again.
Yeah, I wanted to ask about identity because it does happen at a time when you are aware that you're becoming invisible in society, when our culture is telling women to get in the bin because we are no longer fertile, we are no longer in our early 20s, and we live in a very youth-obsessed culture. Alison, you are a model. You literally earned a living from the way you looked. What kind of reckoning was this time for you in terms of identity and self-image?
I mean, I was lucky in the sense that I'd left the modelling industry and was doing other work that was more, well, it wasn't based on my looks. So that actually helped me going into perimenopause. But at the same time, I had moved back from America, so I was in Australia when all the perimenopause and menopausal stuff hit. So I was very much recognised as that old dolly girl, Cosmo girl model. So it was really interesting for a while, like you, Naomi, I felt really embarrassed and ashamed about how I'd aged and thinking like I'd let people down somehow. And
I felt very let down by you getting older.
I know, I remember you mentioned that to me.
So disappointed in you.
I know, God, how dare you age? I've moved through that. I thought there's no way I can stay in that space. That is just not a good place to stay in. So we will get to the plus sides of menopause eventually. But, you know, I had to really sort of dig deep into myself in a way and go, well, who am I? It really made me look at myself as a woman, menopause, and just go, okay, who am I? Who do I want to be? And really it's not about how I look. It's got to be how I feel. It's got to be how I feel. And I would say that over and over again. And how do I get myself feeling good again? So that's where I took it for me because, you know, I went from a size 6 to a size 14 and I was like, oh God, you know, but I was like, okay, I'm just going to own it. I'm just going to lap it all up and this is just who I am and it's okay. Size 16, 14, it's great. As long as I feel good. And that was my goal.
Ginny, Ali and I were all with our partners pre and during and so far post Peri.
I'm not there yet.
Oh, okay.
I'm still in Peri.
Which was challenging in many ways. Naomi, you were dating at that time or with a new partner. What was that like to navigate? Because this was not someone who'd seen you give birth and, you know, had gone through all of those things with you. And you talked about feeling, oh, you've got to be young and hot. And what was that like?
Yeah. And I'll go carefully here to protect the privacy of my relationship. But I will say it was a very awkward time because of the points you just made. I didn't know how squeamish he would be. And like, you know, the idea of exposing such personal things that I knew I felt ashamed of, how would he feel? Ultimately, keeping secrets is too exhausting.
And it's hard to hide a patch when you're in the nude.
It's hard to hide a patch.
Yeah.
It's hard to hide the moods. It's hard to, you know, just show up in the ways that you may have in your 20s and 30s. And so ultimately I made the decision. I thought, well, this is a great litmus test. Let me see how it lands with this guy. And I just got really honest with him. And he was like, oh, wow, cool. Just tell me how I can help. What do I do? And empathy straight away. And, you know, a few jokes to follow as well. But but yes, we instantly, he knew how to behave. He knew how to be gentle and show up. And obviously he passed the litmus test and now we're married.
And I've seen the way he looks at you, and everyone should have someone that looks at them like he looks at you. So it clearly was not an impediment to your relationship.
Just to add to that, I would say anyone who's going through that, because it is common, marriages do break down, marriages will change and people are meeting their second partners. And I think communication is absolutely key, and it's the only way to educate. It's not a failing. It was always supposed to be part of what would happen with your hormonal cycle, and leaning into it, like you said, and owning it is just the only way to deal with it. And the more people understand it, the more we normalize and open this conversation, just get used to it, the better.
And I also think talking to our kids, I mean, you know, Gen X, we do like to talk. So my kids, I remember one of them one night just said, I'm just wondering, how long actually does perimenopause last? I got very angry. But they know a lot about it, you know. My teenagers and my eldest son, they know a lot about it. So that will be good for both the boys and the girls of the next generation. Ginny, I want to ask about HRT before we move on, because when a lot of women go to their GP, something I didn't realise when I first heard the idea of HRT, I was like, oh no, that'll give me cancer. Why was that in my head, and why do so many GPs give such bad advice about HRT and menopause?
So I'm going to do a really quick Reader's Digest. I know I'm a boomer. A Reader's Digest version of what happened and to make HRT get linked to cancer and why so many women are terrified of taking it today. So back in the 1990s, a lot of American studies, which were population studies, you took entire groups of people, they had found that in fact women who were taking hormone replacement therapy, back in those days it was synthetic hormone replacement therapy, we don't tend to use that very much anymore, but those people who were on that HRT actually had less heart disease. So the National Institutes of Health from America said, hey, let's do a massive study, 110,000 women. Let's get them older women, average age 63 when we start this trial, well past when you need your HRT for menopause symptoms. Let's do a study where we give half HRT and half placebo and see what happens, whether it prevents heart disease. Spoiler alert, it doesn't. Doesn't prevent heart disease, particularly in those older women. But what they found back in 2002 was that for every 10,000 women who were taking a placebo, they had 30 cases of breast cancer. For every 10,000 women taking the HRT, the synthetic HRT that we don't really use anymore, there were 38 cases of breast cancer. Now, as a result of that, plus the futility, it did not prevent heart disease, they actually canned the study. But the problem was they went to the press and the subtleties of that messaging, all anybody heard was HRT causes breast cancer. Now, what in fact, if you took the group of women inside that study who were in their early 50s, when they were given the HRT, they didn't get any extra breast cancer. And what it looks like is for body identical HRT, very different to bioidentical, we can talk about that, but body identical HRT doesn't seem to have any increased risk of breast cancer, particularly when it's given to young women, and particularly if you don't stay on it forever. And definitely every menopause society in the world today will say that the benefits of HRT for most women will way outweigh the risks. We don't give it to everybody, but just if you have symptoms, the benefits will outweigh the risks. But what happened after that 2002 study was shut down, and what was called the Women's Health Initiative study, was there were hundreds of lawsuits, particularly in America, the lawsuit capital of the world. And in fact, the drug company that made that form of HRT that was used in that trial went bankrupt and was sold off. And the parent company that ended up buying it had to settle $350 million worth of lawsuits for women who had breast cancer. And every drug company in the world said, too hard. They rolled down the shutters on all of their women's health division, particularly for midlife women. They stopped doing research. They stopped teaching at university. I myself got zero training. I didn't even get an hour of training on menopause through my whole journey into general practice. And most doctors to this day know nothing about the management of menopause. Now that's going to impact all of you, because I see patients every day who've gone to their GP and said, I'd like to go on hormone replacement therapy, and the GP says, that's dangerous, I'm not giving it to you. Your mother had breast cancer, you can't have it. Well, no, that's definitely not the case. But there is this fear that has pervaded all of the women. And to this day, to my horror, there are still black box warnings on every form of HRT that most of us here
What's
take.
a black box warning?
So that's a mandatory government-led warning that says this thing can give you breast cancer. I mean, you and I will chuck out the packet inserts and just say,
I never noticed that on my packet.
Yeah. I ignore it.
Just rip it open.
They are there. Those warnings are there. And for women who take their health seriously and actually read the packet inserts, that's terrifying.
So before we move on to identity, and I'm going to ask about this reinvention stage of life, which is one of the most positive things that come with being this age and going through this, what should someone do? Like, if there is so much misinformation out there, what do you do? What's the first port of call?
So I think, as I said, there are no two women who are the same, and even getting the right HRT formulation, it can take a lot of kissing a lot of frogs to get your handsome prince and get you to the place where you feel right. And you need to work with a doctor who will listen to you. Not everybody needs or wants HRT, and there are other options out there. It's not the only thing. The problem is with that 53 symptoms that we talked about, to get all of them wrapped up in a single treatment, whether it's your joint pain or your mental health concerns or your insomnia and your hot flushes and your itchy skin and your palpitations, there is only one treatment that will get rid of all of it and strengthen your bones and reduce your risk of bowel cancer. So, yeah, that's just get armed with the facts and find a doctor who will listen to you.
Up next, we talked about a lot of things that piss us off, as you just heard, but there are actually a lot of positives to going through this phase of life. Stay with us because we're going to talk about those. I would like to talk about the freeing nature of what can happen in this life stage, because we've talked and been honest about some of the more negative things, and hopefully more women won't go through it because there are more women speaking out now. But you decided to start a business at this life stage. You know, there are a lot of actors and celebrities who are doing skincare and doing makeup. Starting a line of menopause products is not the most sexiest choice you could have made. Why did you choose, with the launch of Stripes, to do this?
I think given that I had been living with the secret for so long and feeling that shame and not being able to discuss it, even amongst my friends, I did sort of crack jokes with my friends about having an estrogen dip, and it was always met with a nervous laugh, So I was like, okay, that was a feeler check. No one else is in menopause around me, so I'll just keep quiet. And I think after a certain number of years, you just get bored of that. And then I started to really just become my own advocate of how to piecemeal all the information. And luckily, the internet was quite active by, the 4th or 5th year of these symptoms. And so I was finding more and more information and going to different doctors. And like you say, if your doctor's not going to give you or hear you in the right way, then you really should just change your doctor. I'm, to this day, still learning more, and I am deep, deep, deep into the research now. Having started the company, it's been percolating for 3 years now, but it's been on the shelves for a year in the US. I decided that I had to do it. I couldn't not do it because I needed a place to go. There was nowhere to go. There was no conversation. So I thought, what if there was a place to go for others? Because no one should have to walk through this alone. I had already spent a lot of time with skincare because I had become a co-founder of a company called Onda Beauty, which was because I was having dry, itchy skin, raging skin, and I'm an actor and I work on screen and have to apply makeup all day long. And my skin was just yelling and screaming at me. So I had to sort of look into the ingredients that I was using that worked perfectly well for many years. I had to make adjustments there, and I had to use gentler ingredients. So I became passionate and well-versed in ingredients. But then I started looking at all of these brands, and I'm talking like between 70 and 80 different brands, and I saw, that was good for this thing, and that was good for maybe my hair, and this was good for my body, and but I don't like how they're speaking to me, promising the world of this and throwing a 28-year-old up there to sell the product, and that doesn't feel good. I want to feel authenticity. I'm not going to suffer fools. I'm not going to be fed a whole bunch of nonsense. So it really became clear to me that a brand was needed to address all of the pain points, or as many as possible. We don't have estrogen. And by the way, the fear that you speak of, literally women have come up to me and said, is there estrogen in there? Because I can't take it. No, we don't have hormones in our products, but we have powerful active ingredients that have real good ways of hydrating, and ectoin and squalene, which is a paired combination of locking in the moisture. And ectoin is an unbelievable smart ingredient that knows how to identify where water is needed, and it can collect and multiply the water and lock it in. So the two things are in all of our products. I've got 5 here. This is Vag of Honor. Ladies.
Yeah, can we talk about Vages? Because I know everyone's been so excited to talk about Vages. The Vag moisturiser aisle in the chemist is not one that you will find easily. And it's not one that you will probably be comfortable asking the very young, usually male sales assistant to help you find.
And it's not one you want to bump into anyone else.
No, you don't want to pause too long there. And because of all the shame, there's a lot of things it's not just about your top, it's also about the bottom areas. I love that you've got 2 Vag products.
Yeah.
What do they do?
There's a lube as well, which is somewhere else.
What's it called? Play
oil. And it's called Oh My Glide. And
Oh, my glide.
Yeah, we've tried to have fun with the names because as
Badge
you've
of honour.
heard,
I love that.
You've heard us bitch and moan here about all of the negative sides.
And
of
they will
things.
look nice next to your bed or in your bedside table.
Yes, that's not something that you have to necessarily hide. I wanted to have fun with the names and the colour palette and feel like this is actually a vibrant time of our lives. Look at all of you women here. You're all doing fantastic things. It's not the end. There's so much life to live. We know we're living longer now. And shifting the narrative was the most important thing for me. Do not hide in shame and secrecy. Come out and own it and set yourself up better for the last part of your life, which is possibly a third, even a half of your life. I've got 2 grandmas, guys, who are still living. One's 100 and one's 98.
Ali, I wanted to ask you about, you spoke really movingly, and thank you for sharing that about your rock bottom, essentially. But then when we were talking in the green room about what happened after that and what benefits this life stage has brought to you, can you speak a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I think like anything in life, sometimes it's sort of like, what can menopause do for you? And that was as I said, that was my goal. I was sort of like, I knew I needed to move out of this depressed state. I knew I needed to help my body. And in doing that, there was so much that happened during that time. I can honestly say I'm so grateful. I've went through perimenopause and menopause, and I feel like it's something that it can feel like a doom and gloom thing on your horizon, but there's like an allocating of your tools that start to happen as well. That's what I found. Like I'd always been this outgoing giver, who needs this, who needs that, who needs this. And I was bottom of the list constantly. And when perimenopause and menopause hit, all of a sudden I became top of the list, and I loved being top of the list. I was co-top. I didn't sort of move anyone else further down, but there was
why?
things.
Like what changed? What took you to the top of the list? Just because you were so unpleasant to be around, everyone else went away? That's what happened to
Well,
me.
it was just those things of going, what do I need? It was that simple question, what do I actually need? Because I'd felt so crap. And I was like, what do I need to make myself feel better? I need to pull back from work. I need to have a massage. I need to go for a walk. I need to just go to my room and just cry for a bit. I need to go read a book. And it was little subtle things. And you know what I really needed to do? I really needed to start being kinder how I spoke to myself. That was a big thing for me because I'd been through the shame. I'd been through, even years before perimenopause, I was very, very hard on the way I looked and whatever. A lot of women do that, I guess. But I was like, you know what, Ali, enough. It's actually enough that you're doing this. Like you're going through a tough time. You've got years ahead of you. Can you just be nice? Just be nice to yourself. So I really pulled back on that self-critical talk, and I felt so much freedom in that. I said no when I wanted to say no. I said yes when I wanted to say yes. And I started trying new things. I picked up different careers. I let go of fear of things. And so I actually found it incredibly invigorating to go through perimenopause and get to that. I'm now post, but I also think at the same time, it's like to have that experience of the challenges was actually really what gave me that base to then spring forward into, just a much, much better part of my life. I'm happier now and healthier now than I ever have been.
Ginni, one of the things that a lot of women experience around this time is a change in libido. And sometimes they feel that it might be that they don't love their partner anymore, and it's no accident that a lot of women get divorced at this time. What do you see, and what advice do you give to the women that you see in terms of managing that? Because it might not be in concert with the partner in their life if they have one.
Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, your vagina. We have to talk about her. Your vagina has estrogen receptors, kind of said that they're everywhere. They help her to make the self-cleaning fluid that is the vaginal discharge. 5 mils is normal. You never miss it so much until you don't have it, because sex is really uncomfortable. And you're not going to get libido happening if it feels like your vagina is being rammed by a sandpaper-covered battering ram. It's just not going to be fun.
It's not sexy.
No.
Write that down.
So, note to self, Reno the vajayjay first, okay? The other thing is, if you are feeling really hot, another body on top of you is just your worst nightmare. And if you are exhausted and your hottest bedroom fantasy involves a sleep mask and a pillow, it's just not good for the libido. Let's say you've worked all of that out. There are 2 types of low libido. Low libido number 1 is, I really don't want this. I'm going to make an excuse. I'm going to be on the phone. I'm going to be brushing my teeth for an hour hoping he falls asleep. But then occasionally you give in, you do it and you go, you know what, that was actually quite good. I should probably do that more often. We call that being married. That's very common. Okay. Low libido number 2 is quite different. Okay, that is, well, that's 10 minutes of my life I don't get back. I didn't orgasm, you can't orgasm, you have no sexual fantasies, and you never ever masturbate. Now, we never talk about this, but that is called hypoactive sexual desire disorder. I ask all my new patients about this. They're just horrified when I ask them about their masturbation. But when we do ask, there's a reason, because if you meet the criteria for hypoactive sexual desire disorder, which is more common, I'm not asking for a show of hands, but statistically...
But if you want to...
But we're about 10% of the population fit that criteria, and you have low testosterone levels. The advice of the International Menopause Society is that you would benefit from testosterone. Now, in the case of women, we are very lucky here in Australia. We have a product that is formulated here and manufactured here in Australia. You put a little bit like on kind of around your bikini line, keep changing it, otherwise you're going to grow black hair where you don't want it on your belly, as if the patch is not off-putting enough.
So is it a cream? Or
it's a cream, and you put 1 ml on a day, and then we retest your testosterone levels, but it is a game changer. As to whether it gives you other benefits, brain benefits, gets rid of your brain fog, gets rid of depression. Have any of you heard of Dr. Louise Newson in the UK? Yes, I'm a big fan of hers. She runs multiple clinics in the UK, and she has actually a data scientist working within her clinic. So everybody has de-identified data. According to her data, testosterone is very powerful for brain fog, very powerful for strength, but also very powerful for depression as well. Now, that data is not good enough. We would not call that a randomised placebo-controlled trial. At this point, according to international guidelines, you would only get that if you have hypoactive sexual desire disorder, but you're probably going to get a few other benefits thrown in.
Wow. It's a lot to take in.
Yeah, actually, I'll say I just added that to my routine. I had tried it earlier on and I didn't like it at the time that I tried it, and this is just testament to what you said before about hormones going up and down, and obviously I didn't need it that much. I even got like a little bit of the like the male kind of rage, I suppose. So I stopped it, and then recently I've added it. In America, we're given drops. Do you not like those? Oh.
Just not great absorption.
Okay.
Just stock up while you're here in Australia.
Maybe I should.
Because
well, come on then.
It's the best, because they sell more. Yeah.
She'll do
I actually
some lube for some cream.
I'll give you.
We'll do a deal later.
I'll negotiate this trade.
To speak to the brain fog, yes, it makes me clearer and more focused in, say, a meeting or a situation where you have to be more on top of things, more in control. And
because we're not trying to turn you into a man. We're not giving you the kind of testosterone levels that are going to actually make you turn into a bloke. We're trying to get your testosterone levels up to a premenopausal woman's testosterone levels. That's all.
I've heard it can, if you overdo it, your clitoris can change.
It does. It grows.
You can grow a penis.
Don't do that. Not attractive.
And so many things today.
But we'll continue to monitor your blood levels. We're giving you really tiny amounts.
And
like
your
seriously.
clitoris, hopefully.
Not mandatory for every menopause check. If you want to avoid the doctor,
Keep
that's
your
not the
pants
reason.
on, it's an option. I wanted to ask all of you actually about the brain fog, because for me that was one of the things I struggled with most, and it's responsible for a lot of women leaving the workforce. We've seen data on that. It does happen. I know that in terms of my self-esteem, it really affected it because I, trying to run a business, I pride myself on being pretty sharp, and I just It really affected my self-esteem. Ali, was brain fog something that you experienced, or can't you remember?
What is a brain? Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And I was always the one that held the memory in the partnership between me and Cam. Cam's like always got brain fog. So he would always rely on me to remember people's names and birthdays and stuff. And that just started slipping away. So yeah, that was definitely something. And it's still there. Like I'm not as sharp as I used to be, for sure. But on that topic, I was just sent just recently a preview of a book. It's coming out next year. She's a neurologist, a top neurologist in Australia, Lisa Mosconi.
Yeah.
She's written a book called Menopause Brain. And they actually do
We
imaging.
all couldn't remember. I'm glad between the four of us we could remember the name.
I'm so excited. And they did imaging of perimenopause, menopause and postmenopause and how the brain actually changes. And I thought that was so interesting because, you know, this idea that we're sort of left as women that, I'm going crazy, or I don't know, I just feel off. And that's why I think part of the challenge of going to a doctor is because you can't often define what you're feeling. You just don't feel like yourself. And the more information that we have to go, yes, that is actually a real thing, is exciting to me. And I think that helps more women to go, this is actually what's happening.
Yeah.
The brain fog is real because now there's a book or there's other doctors talking about it. So yeah, long answer, but yeah, had brain fog.
No, that was great. And if I can add to it, like, we should start this conversation in sex ed at school when they start the conversation about puberty. This is the bookend. It's an adult version of it. You know, take it that far
What's reverse
back.
puberty, right?
Yeah, basically. I know I've sat here making jokes about hormones and everything. I take it very seriously, and I know it's not everyone's choice or possibly not safe for everyone, but to have your doctor walk you through it is absolutely key. If we could have just a simple medical alignment on what's going on, because there are so many doctors that disagree with each other and still uphold this bad messaging. We need to know that. We need better research for women. It's just not enough. We're living longer, so why can't we be better set up? And you have to be a little bit of your own best advocate, but you also need to demand more from your doctors. And it's absolutely true. I've sat in many of these panels and watched surveys play out. They are not trained at all. It's up to them to get their training. So you have to trust yourself. But now with all of the information just arising as this conversation's opened up in the last couple of years, you can go at least equipped with the right amount of questions and advocate for yourself.
One of the things that I think has just been so fantastic about living in this time now is we all talked about the secrecy, the shame, the stigma, the lack of information. I know when at Mamamia we did the Very Peri Summit a few years ago, and there were tens of thousands of women that were like, oh my God, me too, because I think one of the most challenging things I know for me, and many women said the same thing, is that because the symptoms are so not random, but disparate, everything from hot flushes to brain fog to heavy periods to rage to libido, it can be very hard to understand that they're all part of the same thing. It wasn't until I went to see an endocrinologist, because I suspected that's what it was, and he actually said to me, you're the first patient I've seen today, and I've seen 15, that hasn't cried. And I said, I just got here, there's still time. And I was really grateful that I was, his name Professor John Eden, one of the early experts in menopause and perimenopause, and he talked me through HRT, because I assumed that my mum wasn't on it, but when I spoke to her, she goes, oh, absolutely, of course I'm on it. And so, I got on it too, and I also speak to women who are very nervous about it, and you've got to make the right decision for you. But women talking about it now, I think this is just such a wonderful thing, in the same way that we talk about mental health now, and a generation ago we didn't. Ginni, what is the biggest misconception about this phase of life?
Like you guys, I hadn't heard of perimenopause, and I had a lot of misconceptions.
You're a doctor.
And I'm a doctor.
And a girl doctor.
And I was doing women's health. Yes. And I'm so ashamed now.
Don't cancel me for saying that. I know she's a woman. I know she's not a girl.
Yeah. But I feel now that let the patients down because I had no idea what was going on. And I'm really lucky that I host a podcast which is educational for doctors. And we had so many menopause specialists coming on, and every time I would hear someone like John Eden or Professor Rod Baber or Professor Susan Davis, Australia's got an unbelievable menopause specialist, I would think, I don't know any of this. This is a black hole in my knowledge. When the publishers of this book came to me and said, we would like you to write a book on menopause, I was like, fuck off, how old do you think I am?
Yeah, exactly.
And then I was like, oh, wait, 50, yes.
But were you a bit like, that's not really how I see myself?
I was like, I'm young. Like, don't you want me to write a parenting book on toddlers? But no. But then I was like, okay. And I fell into the bit, there's so much to know. And now there's a network of doctors.
This is the most phenomenal handbook, honestly.
Oh, thank you. So when I first started practicing in menopause, because it hooks you in, because you can do more good for people in this space in life than you can for any other group of people at all. It's so addictive. When I first started in this space, people would be very tentative coming to see me and really sheepish, and what else could I do? I don't really want to do hormones. Now I'm very likely to have a 41-year-old woman who says, hi, I'm crying all the time, can I have hormone replacement therapy? I'm like, whoa, Tonto, tell me about your periods. But a lot of that, I am really grateful to the other 3 women on this panel who've made an enormous difference. I think starting with you, Mia, I remember when we first started talking about the Very Peri Summit, I was like, that is so brave. You're going to go out there and say that you're perimenopausal. And I think Ali's book coming out, but also I think particularly to Naomi, because the world has changed because of you, and everybody in this room, and everybody's a beneficiary of that. So thank you.
Just to wrap up, I want to sort of just go through and ask each of you to sum up where you're at, now with your symptoms, with your outlook, and what's great about being in your 50s.
My people pleaser's pretty much gone to sleep. I find myself feeling way more creative than I ever have before. I feel like I'm ready to sort of try new things. It's a weird thing. I think I'd had this idea that you got stuck in one line of work, or you couldn't change, you're too old to do this. For me, I could go do another course on something, or change complete careers and do something else that invigorates me. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited to be a grandma. I'm not that my kids are pregnant, but I'm excited for that phase of life. Yeah, there's so much more that I want to sort of chew off and eat.
Ginny?
So yeah, I'm still in perimenopause, and I've had a very easy journey. I feel very guilty about saying it. My worst thing was very heavy bleeding, so I needed to have...
How do you know you're still in peri?
Because I've got regular periods, so reasonably regular-ish.
But if you have a marina like I do, because
I do too.
Everyone wanted to know that.
Love it.
It can be hard to know. So a marina, for those playing along at home, is an IUD. Why don't we get the doctor to tell us what a marina is instead of me?
So it's a little device. It sits inside your uterus, and it has progesterone that comes out every single day. It is a synthetic progesterone, one of the old school ones. We don't have an available marina with the new body identical progesterone.
But it means that you don't get your period. So it can be hard. Well, sorry, it's for some of us, a lot of people.
I mean, I still get my period because that's what...
You've got one too?
Yeah, I've had one since my daughter was born, and she's 26 now. So I just keep changing it every 5 years, but I definitely knew something was wrong when I was hosting radio at 2GB. If anyone knows anything about what 2GB is, it's not the radio station where it's really easy to do the walk of shame.
I imagine there aren't free tampons in the bathroom like there are at Mamamia, put it that way.
Mamamia, where they've worked out that nobody steals tampons when you keep them at work. We are actually, the sisterhood says, you just have respect for the fact that nobody wants to do the walk of shame. So when I had a massive flood into my jeans in the middle of a radio show and had to do the walk of shame, and you know what? Is there anybody else in the building with a vagina and a tampon? No. And no was not able to go to the local 7-Eleven, just had to use a stack of toilet paper. That's how I worked out that I had a polyp, and I had that change. But other than that, I've had a very easy peri. But being a tiny part, but being ever so small a part of this movement that is helping women not go through what our mothers did, and how they suffered, and how they all had hysterectomies at early ages for no reason, and how they were shamed and stigmatised and couldn't talk to us about it. Playing that little role makes every day so exciting and just an absolute thrill to be part of it.
Naomi, I want to finish with you. You've come out, you've overcome the stigma, the shame, you've launched a business, you've remarried. It's a pretty exciting time of your life from the outside. How's it feeling on the inside?
Great. But first, I'm married for the first time, I will say.
First time.
Yeah, which was really lovely.
Did you wear white? Well, we all saw. It was so chic.
I feel
He's
good.
so handsome
and
lovely. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. I think so too. I feel like being on the other side of it now, understanding everything, we've been through everything. Part of the reason I called it Stripes was that this is a time to shine. This is a time to feel your best and feel like you can hold your head high. Your cumulative experiences matter and you've earned your stripes. And so I wanted to sort of reinvent this narrative and make us feel like proud of this time. We do get to the other side and feel like there's a reclaiming of oneself. Our hormones have driven us entirely to this point, and sometimes not always in the best direction. And so it's actually nice to be on the other side of it. And yes, I still have symptoms. Yes, I mean, we were talking about it in the green room. I've got a frozen shoulder and I still get hot at night sometimes. HRT is not a silver bullet, but it is the gold standard and it's safe for me. So I feel good. I feel my best. I'm open to trying new things. I'm leaning into saying yes to as many opportunities and things that I haven't tried before. I don't care about the small shit anymore, or I give, less shits about it. And I feel like alive and like there's so much more to do. And I'm encouraged that we're normalizing this conversation between all of us, that we'll be the last generation to have shame about it. And all of your daughters and younger sisters around you are going to feel well set up. And to me, that's great news. And yeah, I'm just happy that you guys are here to listen, because that means you're interested and invested too.
I hope you enjoyed that. We certainly did. We had such a good time, as I hope you could hear on that panel. I highly recommend following all of these women on Instagram if you want to hear more from them. And we've got so many more resources at Mamamia if you are going through peri-menopause or menopause. We'll put a link to those in the show notes. The executive producer of No Filter is Kimberly Bradish, with sound production on this episode by Tegan Sadler and Madeline Joannou. I'm Mia Freedman, and thanks for supporting women's media.